Good evening and welcome to our next session of Theology on Tap. We are in the month of March and we have an M guest. Our next guest is Sister Michelle Garlinski.
Hi, Michael.
Now you say something.
We also have an M host.
That's correct. Double M.
That's it.
And I was saying to the people last time, Michelle, that I started Theology on Tap this year, giving a big introduction of the people, but then I'd asked them to tell a little bit about themselves, and then I had already said it.
So you were ahead of yourself, so you saved time.
So I want you to tell me a little bit about yourself, our new guest.
So I'm doing all the work. Is that what you're saying?
That is why we brought you here.
Excellent. Excellent. Right on. Well, happy St. Paddy's Day by the time everybody's watching this and joining in with their maybe cup of Irish coffee or a little bit of stout or whatever. However you need to kiss the Blarney Stone on St. Patrick's Day, you go right ahead. So my name is Sister Michelle. I am a Sister of the Holy Names of Jesus and Mary. I live in Winnipeg. And born and raised, with the exception of spending just about 4 years in the city of Calgary and a year during my novitiate formation time in Berkeley, California. Ooh. So currently I work at St. Mary's Academy. I'm in my 17th year at St. Mary's Academy. And I started as the director of campus ministry when I first was hired. And then I'm currently serving in the role of director of mission and charism. And so we are an all-girls Catholic school who have students from grade 7 through 12 with us. And we have a long-standing history of about 152 years that we've been around here. And so so that's what I do. That's who I am. I'm the third of 3 children in my family. I'm the youngest, and all of my family also resides pretty much here in Winnipeg as well. And that's great, except for during COVID, when it doesn't really matter where they live because you don't get to see them anyway. But yeah, so it's great to be here. I'm excited to be connected with the University of Saskatchewan and STM doing this evening because I love STM. I love Saskatoon. So
right.
Yeah, this is
that's
one way
what we'd like to hear from our out of town guests. So did you say you were at the Academy for 17 years?
Yeah, I think I'm in my 17th year. I think so.
Okay. Wow.
I know.
That's awesome. And then, but you also used to work in youth ministry in Winnipeg, right?
I did. So my whole kind of professional vocation has been in pretty much some form of ecclesial ministry. When I finished my undergrad here at the University of Winnipeg, I opted to apply for a job in Calgary and was hired there as their first youth ministry coordinator at the parish of St. Bonaventure in the southeast corner of Calgary. Well, it was then, but now there's a much wider corner. It's not the corner anymore. And so I was there for just about 4 years and was probably just one of those great experiences being there. Learned a lot about myself, learned a lot about ministry. Then I was invited to come back to Winnipeg. One of the pastors who really wanted to keep me here when I was leaving, but was in a parish situation that just couldn't afford it. And he said, someday I'll bring you home. And so he gave me a call and he said, it's time to come home. I've got something I think that you might like. So I returned and for 9 years served in the community of St. John Brebeuf as the coordinator of youth ministry and intergenerational faith formation. And that was really cool because I was working with a school and a parish directly, and a parish that I'd never really connected with in my entire life growing up here. So it was sort of new in my own city. And then, yeah, and then one thing led to another. And I had an invitation to have a conversation to see if I'd be interested in coming to St. Mary's. And St. Mary's is my alma mater. So there was something about going home again for me. And so I thought, why not? And yeah, so I could take everything that I learned in youth ministry, really, and transfer it into a school scenario. The good thing was that in youth ministry, sometimes you have to figure out ways of how to get the kids there. And I didn't have to figure it out. They were there every day. And, so I thought this was too good to be true. Yeah, so youth ministry and campus ministry, and now charism and mission work has been my kind of areas of professional vocational work.
Okay, great. So it's March. We're celebrating March. We're celebrating St. Patrick's Day, and
St. Joseph.
Yeah, and then so remind me, when is St. John Brebeuf's feast day?
Well, it depends if you live in Canada or in the U.S. But since, as the cup says, we celebrate it in September, September the 26th, and and they celebrate it October 19th, I think. So in the fall. So it always was great because we'd celebrate Jean de Brebeuf with his companions and friends right around like Thanksgiving and harvest and lots of stuff like that. So it was always good.
Okay. So when we first met, I knew you as Michelle, and now your sister, Michelle. And I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about that vocation journey and how God has called you into this new moment.
All I can say is God is a God of surprises. I really can say that you never say never in your life because you just have no idea what God can be inviting you into. So so I think it would be safe to say that I've always been a bit of a church rat, like kind of always. We grew up around the church. My family was very involved in the church. We were just sort of kind of always around. So it was a very familiar place for me, a very comfortable place for me. And our world, I'm going to back it up a little bit. Our world got a little rocked when I was in high school in the 11th grade because my mom was diagnosed with cancer. And so she was diagnosed with cancer Christmas Eve morning. And at the same time, my grandmother, who had immigrated from the Ukraine many years before, was elderly and living with us. And so she was living with us. And so in January of that year, she passed away. So she passed away. And then on March the 4th, my mom passed away. And then literally like 8 hours later, I had an aunt die who was in the same hospital as my mom. Whoa. And so as a 16-year-old, I was really faced with, I guess we would call it trauma, right? But at the time you just, you think this is crazy life. And so I would say at that time, I spent a lot of my time, I would say, doing what teenagers do. They were looking for answers. I was looking to find out why this happened, what was going on. I shut down. I can remember kind of pulling away from the church, not from community, from people, but from going to mass and sort of anything institutional, and sort of rejecting that part of God. And and hindsight, and with all my background in youth ministry, I think I did probably what most teenagers would do. It wasn't unusual. I can remember being, in 12th grade, and we used to do reconciliation, grade level reconciliation. And I remember being in the chapel and saying, and, everybody was kind of in there, and one of the teachers coming up to me and saying, okay, Father so-and-so is free, you can go. And I just remember sitting there and saying, I don't think I could have done anything worse than what God's done to me. And I remember thinking, what kind of God does this? Like, what's going on? And, over time, I really missed the ritual. I missed being with community at prayer. I knew there was something missing in my life, and a big part of it was God. And it was like I knew that God hadn't stepped away, I did. Again, you're 19 or 18, 19, 20, and you pretty much, I kind of thought I knew all the answers to life. So, I didn't need God, right? I mean, I got this. And so I realized that something was missing. And so I started kind of connecting with my faith community again, and getting back sort of on my journey of living out my faith in the ritual ways and sacramentally. And it was amazing, how much it felt right to be back in there. And when I returned from Calgary, I had thought, I think I sort of played around with, is God calling me to something else? I think I knew in my life by that point that I didn't really think that I was called to be married. I sort of was frightened of it because I thought,
is it scary?
Yes, it was like the same person for the rest of my life. I can't do it. Like, this is not going to end well. And I just thought, no, like, I just don't think that's where I'm being called. And, but I love kids, which was great because I was in youth ministry and had a great way to be with young people. And then I went on a kind of a come and see retreat with, it was really not even a retreat. It was just kind of a private situation with the Benedictine sisters here in Winnipeg, because I'd always had a connection with them. And I really love the way they pray. I love the rhythm of prayer that they are so intentional about. And I always say that they taught me how to pray. They taught me how to fall in love with Scripture and be passionate with about the morning and evening prayer of the church. What I learned, was like, yeah, I think this has got something here for me. But I also knew that I don't think a monastic community was my calling or where I needed to be. And so I kind of just shelved the whole thing and thought, you know what, I'll just figure out whatever this void is and do something else. So then I went and studied, started doing theological studies and post-grad studies at Newman, in Edmonton, and at the time in St. Albert. And, that kind of filled a void, right? Then I was like filling my mind and heart with more knowledge and integrating and in dialogue and in community and all these things that were important to me, so it was all coming together, and it was happy and it was good. And, that kind of finishes, and I started St. Mary's, and I was invited to become an associate with the Sisters of the Holy Names of Jesus and Mary. And, it made sense. I was born into a parish that was run by the Holy Names. I was educated by the Holy Names, and I knew the charism of the Holy Names, even though I may not have been able to say it word for word. I knew it. I could feel it. It was part of who I was. So I became an associate, and that was pretty cool. And, learned about, what was going on and how it all worked. And, kind of thought, yeah, maybe. But you know what? I got lots of life to live. So I don't think so. So I just kind of kept ignoring God's kind of invitations. And when I look back, there were like little subtle invitations along the way. And so I had an opportunity to go to Santa Cruz, California. At the time, the director of our school was sending me to go be at this formation session that was learning more about the charism of Blessed Marie Rose de Rocher, our foundress, and learning to embrace the legacy because of my role in the school. So she said, I think you're really going to like it. And it's a beautiful place. It's on the ocean. It's like, okay, I'm in. So I go, and it was almost like my world got cracked open. And I learned all these things about our foundress that I had never really known or understood. I read the constitutions, which, I should have known we had, but I'd never seen them before. And all of a sudden I'm reading through them and seeing, this religious community of women are about education in the faith, and especially to those most in need. And all of a sudden, like all of these aspects of our foundress and her love for Jesus and Mary, and especially the holy names of Jesus and Mary, all of it was coming together. And I read about her life, and I read about her life in the context of her losing her mother when she was young, and her being limited with health conditions that prevented her sometimes from doing some things, and her involvement in the church and starting what would have been known as like the youth group in the parish. And I'm reading all these things in her life, and all of a sudden this woman became real. And I went, like, it's not me, but I could see me and in her, and I could see how God called her. And I was walking literally along the beach, listening to then, I don't know, what did we call them before iPods? MP3s or MP somethings, right?
But not a Walkman?
Well, no, it was smaller than a Walkman. I remember that. It was after that.
Yeah,
but I was walking along the beach after one of the sessions, and one of my favorite music groups is Great Big Sea, right? And Great Big Sea has a song that's called Walk on the Moon. And there's the refrain in the song is, I've got one shot and I'm taking it on you. And I remember walking just along the beach and thinking, this is it. I got one shot in life. Like in the sense of, we have one life to live well. And I'm willing to respond to the call and give this a try. And so then it took me a long time after that to kind of get my ducks in a row, because, it's hard. I was in my late 30s, and, the funny thing is at that retreat in Santa Cruz, it was a week before my 38th birthday, and she died at the age of 38, our foundress. Oh, wow. And I just remember like all these things kind of, well, not that I was thinking I was going to die, but I look back and I think maybe there was a sense of dying to an old self that was going on for me, all these crazy things. So anyway, and then it just took me a little while to, like I say, to get myself, get my act together and sort of realize what a significant step this was going to be. And, it took me a long time to be able to be really comfortable with saying it and being really certain that this is what I needed to do. Because when you start to tell people, it's pretty countercultural to be a religious, more often than not, when somebody tells, you that they're getting married, nobody's like, oh my God, not that, right? Like nobody's like, but this has still a lot of baggage, I think, with it, and understanding of some pre-Vatican II understanding, and what Hollywood and media has done to what religious life is. And so I needed to kind of work through some of those things to be comfortable in my skin, to say, yeah, this is what I'm called to. So yeah. So, and then the rest is history. And I've done my first vows. I've renewed my first vows, and if God and I keep discerning and things work out, then we'll head to final vows. So.
Okay. Wonderful. Oh, that is a wonderful story. Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
My pleasure. I love telling the story. I mean, it's kind of cool.
Yeah.
I mean, it's mine, right? So I'm biased, but yeah.
I was just wondering if you had anything to share with the young adults that might be watching. We're doing this all in distance, so they'll be watching from home or maybe from school, I guess it could be. Any tips or advice to people who are discerning, how God is telling them?
Yeah. Wow. It's like, so I'm in one of those points in my life where I'm really careful about saying things like, oh, well, when I was your age, kind of thing. I just really look back over life, and I realize that just trust the process. Just trust the moment that you're in is where you need to be, and pay attention to what the next moment you're being called to. And I know that sounds a little flaky maybe, or a little, esoteric-y, and like, oh, just be in the moment, but it's like, I really think there's a deep wisdom in it, because I when I look back and I stayed in those moments, and the next moment led me to where I needed to be. And it brought me back to some of those questions, because I had realized that I'd never really found the answers at the time. So those questions will come back if we're patient and we trust the process. I literally was just talking about this with somebody in the last 2 days. And so when I went to the novitiate, and so in formation, for those people who are who don't know about the process for formation, so you become a candidate, or in most communities, others have different layers, but you become a candidate with the community, where you kind of explore the community. And so you usually move in with some, one or more sisters, or if it's a men's community or whatever. But you have this time of that you're just sort of exploring. And then once you're done that phase, you become a novice. And a novice is really when you begin and join the community. It's really an entry point, a very special one. And you do a canonical year as a novitiate, in the novitiate as a novice. And so the novitiate isn't a designated, like, it's not like, oh, there's a novitiate, a novitiate is a designated house or space for those who are in intense formation. And that's what basically is what being a novice is all about. You're in a more intense formation time that candidacy didn't give you, because you were kind of still working and hanging out and still living a little bit of life that you really kind of knew. This removes you from that. So as a novice, I moved, as I mentioned, to Berkeley, California. And there's just nothing wrong with living in California for a year, right? Except you miss your life, right? You miss your friends, you miss your family, you miss the familiar spaces, all of that. And it's in canon law.
Like, is that like the Forks in Winnipeg? That's what you missed?
I missed it totally. I had to trade in the ocean. for the Forks and the Bay. So, but you realize that as the novitiate and that time in the novitiate, that year, that canonical year, there's a real wisdom in the church that invites us to leave behind the familiar and to trust. And before I left, a really good friend of mine said, this is going to be one of the hardest things you may have ever done, that you'll do in your life. And whatever you do, live it through. Don't leave early. Even if you think it's the wrong thing, don't leave early. And I remember thinking, oh, okay. But I think that wisdom I would share with any young adult who's discerning. Be in it, see something through, but be attentive to what's next and where God's calling you. And sometimes we don't know. I always define vocation as where am I most in love with God, and it took me a long time to figure that out. So there's no magic number, there's no magic time, and it's not like somebody can tell you. It's something that you have to figure out with God. But be attentive. Be attentive to the signs around you, and don't write them off. Don't call them coincidence. I don't believe in coincidence. I think they're, as the book says, they're God winks. They're just moments where God's telling us something if we're attentive.
I think that's one of the most challenging things to do in this life today, is to live in the moment and to take quiet time to actually listen for God's voice, because it's so noisy. There's just messages bombarding us every moment. And are we able to take quiet moment to listen?
Yeah. And even if that quiet moment is like going for a walk by yourself, if you're that kind of person who just needs
to be with you, or
yeah, like whatever you gotta do. But I think it's if you really want to know how God's calling you, we have to do our part. We can't say, okay, God's not calling me because God hasn't done anything, but in the meantime, you haven't done anything to kind of help it out and help God out, right? If we don't make the time, we're not doing our part. And like we know in any relationship, we're both co-responsible. So what's your part?
Right. Excellent. So you're knee deep in this ministry, and we've had conversations with other folks in ministry, and just kind of wondering, how do you feel ministered to? Like, who supports you, encourages you, helps sustain you in this life, in this ministry?
I feel really blessed. And I say that because I've just always feel like I've had really solid people around me in ministry. People like Michael McLean, and yeah, and half of the staff at STM, so I think for me, my friends, my family, even when my friends and family didn't always, particularly my family, didn't always understand what I was doing, they trusted me that I was doing what I needed to do and supported me. And, I think that's a real gift when you have those communities of support around you. My sisters, my religious community, I'm connected with sisters all over the world. Like we have the province here in Manitoba, and then we have the U.S. Ontario province, and Lesotho, and Peru, and Brazil. And I mean, I'm obviously not close to all of them, but I have connections with a number of our sisters that are very supportive in the ministry that I'm in, and are in similar roles, and can give me sort of big sister, little sister advice, right? And help me out. But also other people who are also in ministry, who may not be necessarily religious, who are in ministry. Because I think when you're in ministry, it's kind of a different world. And sometimes there's a lot of unspoken language that when somebody's in it with you, you don't need to say it because they get it. And so that's a huge support. So I would say that's another really, really big part of it for me. And just being with the young people that are in the school community is a great gift. So. Right. I also just to throw in, I have a new person who moved into into the living space here, and we started a new community. So I actually have a young adult living with me, who's like 21-ish, and it's a pretty brand new thing, having somebody living with me, because just the reality of our community here in this province. There aren't sisters able to live with me, and so we're exploring different ways of living community. And so having a young adult here, I think, is also a support to me in ministry, because she's able to just sort of remind me of a world that we're in. And it's like asking her questions, or what does this mean, or what does that mean? And so, I mean, that's a real support. So, yeah.
Great. Oh, that's great. So we kind of, we always want to make sure that when we're talking to people about their vocations, we make sure that we mention good news, and talk about what's good. Sometimes people say, oh, I'm in ministry, the hours are long, and I don't get paid very much, or whatever, or the bishop doesn't listen to me or something. I don't know what people's issues are, but maybe it's not as good. But we want to really hear about the good news, and we just want to ask what's good happening in your life. What are some good things going on with you?
With ministry particularly, or in general?
Either or.
Okay. All right. That sounds good. I would say that what is really good news for me is I'm really excited about the fact that my ministry, yes, it's a there's tasks that need to happen, right? And the bad news is I don't always like doing the task. But the good news is that there's a presence that I get to live. I get to live and be what my ministry is. I don't put on a different hat when I leave the building, or when I leave my house in the morning, or anything like that. I get to be me. And I think there's a lot of good news in that for me. Being authentic is a huge aspect of, it's of great importance to me. And if I can be authentic, or at least have the ability to be authentic and try to be authentic, not like I've perfected that by any stretch of the imagination. But if part of what my role is as a religious, and as somebody who in ministry, and as a friend, and as a family member, and in every other role that I may have, if I get to be authentic, that's good news. That's to me is like, does it get better than that?
Right. Oh, that's fantastic. Well, we're so happy that you were able to authentically be with us, even if it wasn't in person, it was virtually. But you know what? That's the great part about our current reality, is we can have guests from Winnipeg, and they don't have to drive here or fly here. So I really want to thank you for being with us. And I want to say cheers.
Cheers.
You know, happy St. Patrick's Day, happy March, and blessings on your term 2. Is that what you call it, term 2?
Yeah, we do. I'm also in school at the same time. So I'm also studying, which I'm in term 2 of. So yeah, everything's term 2 right now. So it's all good. And yeah, and thank you for the invitation. Thanks for hanging out. I'm glad that whoever's watching is watching, and wherever you may be. And yeah, on all the best and blessings for the rest of the Lenten journey as we head to some new life in more ways than one at Easter.
That's right. That's right. Bring on the new life.
Woohoo!
Okay. Thank you again. We'll see you next time.
Great.
Okay.
Bye.